today's episode, we're joined by Pepperdine men's basketball head coach, Lorenzo Romar. Welcome in, everybody, to the Cannon Sports Podcast. I'm Phil George. We are today on campus at Pepperdine University in Firestone Fieldhouse. And our guest today, he is known nationwide as one of the best recruiters in the game of college basketball. He's a three-time Coach of the Year in the Pac-12 and the current head coach of Pepperdine men's basketball, Coach Lorenzo Romar.
Phil, how are you?
Good, Coach. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
You want to introduce yourself real quick?
Oh, yeah. Okay. I'm Lorenzo Romar, head men's basketball coach, Pepperdine University.
All right. Coach, one of the things that stands out about your record, aside from your overall record as a winner in this game, is how quickly you've had an impact at the programs that you've been at. Your first stint here at Pepperdine in the 90s, you oversaw an 11-win improvement from year one to year two, and although you weren't around to see it, your recruits from that team ended up going to an NCAA tournament. At Washington, very much the same thing. You took over a team that was sub 500, and within 3 years, you were in back-to-back Sweet 16s, one of those a number one seed. And then your second stint here at Pepperdine, within 3 years, you won the CBI tournament. So my question to you is, usually the line in coaching is, well, give them 4 years, give them a full recruiting cycle, and then you'll really see the fruits of that. You haven't needed that long. What has been the biggest reason that you've been able to have such a quick impact at these programs?
I think it's pretty simple, Phil. I think you're always better when you surround yourself with good people. And I've had assistants on my staff that, quite frankly, were better coaches than I was. And we were together, though, and I learned from them, and we worked together. I think we've been able to have a staff of guys that have been able to evaluate talent and develop that talent. And I think because of those reasons, we've been able to be fairly successful in short periods of time.
And that idea of a team effort is something that we're going to get into when we talk about recruiting and your history as a recruiter, but really in all aspects of basketball operations. It is more than just the head coach. Can you talk about that dynamic on your staff?
Well, I believe that everyone on the staff, because people will ask that aren't involved in college basketball, well, who does your recruiting? If you're on staff, you're recruiting. And I remember Jim Herrick hired me as an assistant. It was my first job in Division I at UCLA, and he said, Romar, you have 3 jobs: recruit, recruit, and recruit. And I never forgot that, and it's just something that it's our lifeblood. You have to be able to go out and secure talent that's going to be good enough to make your team better, and you can't just do it as one person. You have to have a staff full of assistants where we can work together to be able to identify who's out there and then be able to strategically go after them and get them to convince them to come with you.
And we're definitely going to get into more of the nitty-gritty as to the process behind all that. First, I want to talk about the current state of this Pepperdine team. In the fall, there's going to be a bunch of talent coming back. You had 3 players that made the West Coast Conference all-freshman team a year ago, only the second time in the West Coast Conference history that's happened. And then you have a solid class of incoming talent coming into the program. So tell us why Pepperdine fans should be excited about this season coming up.
Well, the bad news is we weren't very good last year. And the good news, though, is that we had some young players that are hungry that got a whole lot of experience during the year. Some freshmen that maybe in other programs, freshmen don't maybe get that opportunity. But we had a number of guys that went in there and went through the wars. We were close in many games. We weren't able to pull them out. We weren't good enough to pull them out at that time. But now these same guys are back, and which is a blessing given this day and age when guys are on the all-freshman team sometimes at our level, they try to transfer. And these guys have been loyal, and they've decided to stay with us, which is good. So we have a core group that we can build on right now that's hungry and wants to do things the right way, and they want to be a lot better.
Can you give us a preview of some of these guys that we're going to see and what to expect out of them?
Well, our leading scorer last year for the entire team was a freshman, Houston Millette. And if you come to our games, you'll see that He is a really good basketball player. There was a stretch toward the end of the year, I think over a 6-game period, he averaged 24 points a game against some of the competition in the West Coast Conference. But that is just the beginning. He led our team in charges taken. He is a very charismatic kid. He's obsessed with the game of basketball. He wants himself and his team to be the best that we can be. So it really goes beyond the points that are scored. He's extremely valuable basketball player, an extremely valuable program guy. He's just so involved, and he's all about team.
All right.
I would say after that, the starter for us was Mike Mitchell Jr. He was second in the entire conference in assists. He can shoot the basketball. He's one of, if not our best three-point shooter in terms of field goal percentage. He's back a lot more confident. And then Maxwell Lewis, the other guy that was on the all-freshman team, he missed the last 5 or 6 games of conference play and was still voted by the other coaches on the all-freshman team. He probably is our most talented in terms of potential basketball player. He's about 6'6", 6'7". He's long. He's really athletic. He can shoot the basketball, and all those guys will be back together.
And some of the incoming freshmen and transfers coming in as well.
Well, we had the luxury of another freshman this year. Wasn't on the all-freshman team, Carson Basham, who was starting at the end of the year. He's 6'10", so we like him. Incoming is Malik Moore, who is a 6'5" guard, local, that is combo guard, high basketball IQ. And we liken him very much so to the freshman that we had last year, in that he loves the game, he's talented, he's a team guy, he can really shoot the basketball. Jalen Petrie is a kid that started out at Long Beach Poly, and then he finished last year at prep school on the East Coast. And he's 6'8" forward, athletic, really good passer. Javon Porter is 6'10", and very skilled. Not just for his size, period. Regardless of position, he's very skilled. He's the younger brother of Michael Porter Jr., who's playing with the Denver Nuggets, and we're excited to have him. Cord Stansberry, someone that we got late, is a terrific guard that can really handle the ball, shoot the basketball, very good passer. Another guy that's very enthusiastic about the game. And then the one transfer that we have coming in is Boubacar Coulibaly, transfer from USC. And he's a freak athlete. He's 6'10". He can protect the rim, rebound the ball, and really runs the floor. So we're excited about what we have coming back and what we have coming in.
Well, we're excited to see it, and I'm especially excited to talk about the vibe and the rise of mid-major basketball as a whole. Now, this is something that we talked about a little bit before the show, that term mid-major. What does that term mean when you hear it?
I think it talks about the power of the different conferences. You talk about the ACC, you're talking about North Carolina, you're talking about Duke and all the other schools that come with that. Those are Power 5 conferences that traditionally have done really well. Their enrollment is huge. The mid-major enrollment isn't as large as some of these other conferences, and maybe don't have as much tradition. But even with our conference, you look at a Gonzaga, and in the last 6 or 7 years, they've accomplished as much as anyone. So they are as good as any high major team in the country.
And I want to go ahead and give you a few numbers kind of talking about that rise. So last year there were 12 non-Power 6 teams in the KenPom Top 60, and that's up from an average of 10 between 2015 and 2021. And we're talking about teams like Gonzaga, like Houston, who were number 1 and 2 and legitimate Final Four contenders. I think they might object to being classified as mid-majors themselves, but that's due to the conferences that they're in. And also, we've had in the past several years major upsets by St. Peter's, Oral Roberts. It wasn't, Florida Gulf Coast seems like ancient history. It was less than 10 years ago. Can you sell our viewers on just the excitement of mid-major basketball as a whole, especially the brand that you guys have going here in the West Coast Conference?
Well, we'll see what happens with this transfer portal. But what has been the trend, I think now, years ago with the advent of kids coming out early, I think a high level of parity has been created to where it's not just the top power schools that have a chance to win it all. I think there are other schools that are involved now, and teams are older now. I think there are more teams out there that are older, and if a team is not as talented maybe as another higher profile program that can secure that talent when they come in as incoming freshmen, I think the experience still can win out, and I think we've seen that bear out over here in the last few years, and I think it's going to continue to happen, especially with the transfer portal. It's hard. We're trying to do it, but it's hard to build a team from freshmen and they stay with you for 3 or 4 years nowadays. But the ones that are able to get those older players, I think that's where the parity has created. I think that has created more parity for teams to be successful that aren't in the top leagues.
Yeah, and obviously players transferring between different conferences is certainly not new, but the transfer portal, the advent of that, has made it certainly more easy and more frequent, especially with the extra year of eligibility as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic.
Yeah, it's really hard to figure, people ask me, well, how good do you think this team is going to be? Look, I have no idea because I don't know who's going to be on the team, and I can't figure out if this senior has another COVID year or was this his COVID year. It's hard to figure out here. You just got to show up and be ready to go.
How is that something that you navigated, getting players back that you didn't necessarily expect to have back for one more year?
Well, in our situation, it was just a little different. We didn't really have to go through it as much as some others who may have signed four incomers, but yet had 4 seniors that could really play that wanted to come back. We haven't really been in that situation right now.
Another thing that you're seeing is the amount of NBA level talent coming out of these mid-major programs. Everybody knows about Steph and Damian Lillard and Kawhi Leonard. More recently, you had Ja Morant out of Murray State, and even more recently, Kessler Edwards last year became the first player out of Pepperdine to be drafted since 2005. First of all, talk about him and the contributions that he made to this organization and what you expect out of him in the NBA.
It's interesting. First of all, we just saw him walk by. He's in here working out. Kessler came in as a freshman. Wasn't very strong at the time, was still developing his coordination and his footwork, and to his credit, he just continued to work. I mean, he after about a year and a half, he really began to work after our practices on his own and became a very good shooter. He was already a really good rebounder, just became a really good basketball player to where, you mentioned since 2005, but I don't know if there's been one that's been an underclassman that's come out early like Kessler did and was still in the draft and ended up making the team and being a contributor. He started many games for the Brooklyn Nets.
Playing well.
Yeah, played well. You could tell that they appreciate him and respect him. The veterans on that team, you can tell they pass him the ball because they respect his game. So he's earned his way in there. So it's been great. And there's a lot of money being spent by the NBA nowadays, to recruit any level. I mean, they spend a ton of money going international. They recruit every level. If you can play basketball at that level, they find you nowadays.
Well, and that's what I was going to say. What is the new thing? Is it a new thing that these schools are starting to become hotbeds of NBA talent, or is the new thing that the NBA is finally starting to notice?
No, I think the NBA notices, and I think that there was a trend created, as I mentioned earlier, years ago, where there was a time where you could come out of high school. I think it lasted a year or two. Back in the early 2000s, you could come out of high school and go straight into the NBA. Well, that rule was modified a little bit, but you can still come out after your first year. So I just think the mindset, when you look at the NBA draft, how many young players are drafted and not as many seniors, I think that's just kind of how people look at it nowadays. And you just teams are willing to take a risk and let you develop a little more. I think NBA teams have gone through it enough to where they kind of see and can project a kid's trajectory to see how quickly he's going to be able to help them or not. And it's just a new day. It's a different game now. So kids have a different mindset. The NBA has a different mindset. So they want to see them early as possible to know if they're going to draft them after a year or two.
What do you think about the one and done rule?
Oh, I think it's fine. I think it hurts some kids. This is where I think it hurts some kids. Everybody thinks they're one and done, unless the coach.
Some guys think they're none and done.
Well, yeah, exactly. And I was going to say, unless the coaches mess them up, they're one and done in their mind. So I think that hurts a lot of kids and I think that leads to kids transferring because they want this instant success, and if they don't get it, it's not their fault, it's someone else's fault. And I think it hurts some kids because they're able to go out early. Everyone thinks they're just as good as the other ones that really are good enough, and they end up not reaching their potential.
Do you think there are guys in high school right now who could be NBA ready next season? Our last guest actually had an interesting perspective on this. It was Eric Sondheimer, the LA Times prep sports reporter. So he's obviously seen the bulk of the good high school talent in this area. He didn't seem to think that the vast majority, if any of them, were NBA ready. What are your thoughts?
Well, that's what it seems like, but every year there's someone are they NBA ready to go in and contribute on a good team? Probably not. That's very few that are like that. But in terms of what the NBA is looking for, we're going to draft this kid, we're going to work with him, and within a couple of years he will be ready. Well, then there always is someone like that are out there. And it really has amazed me over the years where you watch someone play and in high school and they're saying this kid's going to be a lottery pick, and you're saying, really? What do they see? And next thing you know, after a couple of years, he's in there playing and contributing. So the NBA has done a good job of learning how to evaluate that potential.
Well, and you yourself have helped dozens of players get to the NBA yourself, and really the player development landscape has changed. There are several new avenues that are available now, starting from such a young age with the AAU circuit. You've got the rise of the G League as really a true alternative to some players who want to forego college. Talk about some of those avenues that are available for player development and how they differ from when you came up through your playing days.
Well, there wasn't many of that. I was talking to you off the air before the show about when I played, it was the CBA. That was the G League back in that day. And the same idea, you went to the CBA and they picked you up from the NBA. Teams would send NBA players back down to the CBA for seasoning. But I don't know if there was a lot of extra player development like there is now. There's a lot more in investing in young players because I think teams have figured it out. We're going to have additional staff members to help with this player development, where before, when this wasn't an issue, when you can come out early, they didn't have all that. But now they're so much more prepared when you do get to the league and you're a young player to help you develop.
And how does that affect your recruiting process when you're talking to these players who have come up through all of these different avenues? They've been heavily coached their entire lives, and now they come in, they're already to a degree pretty polished, and now you have to coach them your way. Does that present any sort of difficulty?
Well, I truly believe the style of play that we play with is one that prepares you for the NBA. I think it helps us be the best that we can be, but I also think it helps you get ready to play at the next level. And I think kids may have seen that over the years, and that's what they want. And we're not playing a style, say, look, all we're trying to do is get guys to the NBA. That's not what we're trying to do, but it just so happens, I think the way we play, I think our guys come to our program and are able to play with a lot of confidence, and I think that helps them play at their best.
What is that style, and what is it about it that makes for such NBA ready talent?
Well, we want to try to like a lot of programs do, but we like kids that are versatile. Kids that can play all over the floor. Doesn't matter their height, but they can play all over the floor. It may be a 6'3" guard that's really good at posting up, passing out of the post on the double team, whatever it is. I had the good fortune of playing for a guy named Don Nelson with the Milwaukee Bucks. Once you were on his team, he didn't concentrate as much as what you couldn't do, but what you could do. And whatever you could do, he would put you in that position to do that. I worked with Jim Herrick, as I mentioned before, and he was a master at putting guys in position to accentuate their strengths. And I think I learned from that, and that's basically what we try to do.
And that's one thing that you see in the modern NBA as well, is there's a little bit more fluidity between the positions on the court, and you have players who, the point forward, I don't believe was a thing that long ago.
Well, there's some debate as to who that was. A good friend of mine, Marcus Johnson, who was College Player of the Year at UCLA in '77, and then went on to be a perennial All-Star with the Milwaukee Bucks. He played point forward for Don Nelson with the Milwaukee Bucks, and he believes he was the first one. Johnny Johnson, people won't know who that is, but he played with the Seattle Sonics. They won championships in the late 70s, and he was a point forward. I played with a guy named Paul Pressey. He was a point forward, but there was nowhere close to where Giannis is your center, but he's your point center. Jokic, the Joker, he's your center, but he's your point center. That was unheard of back then, but the players are so skilled now, and as they say, it's positionless basketball. Anyone can be in any position.
Yeah, now all the big men are shooting threes.
Right. Well, the game has changed, so you got to be able to shoot threes most of the time when you're out there, but that's where we're at now, I think, at every level.
So getting into recruiting, you are widely known as one of the top recruiters in college basketball, and it started very early. You were only a couple of seasons in your first job in coaching, and you were credited with recruiting several members of the 1995 national champion UCLA team. There were 6 NBA guys on that team. What was your contribution as far as recruiting to that team, and did you envision having that much success that early on?
That wasn't the goal. Was to be successful as a team. The goal was to help Jim Herrick, who I worked for, to be the best that he could be and best we could be. And I never looked at it as personal success. I'm going to have to tell you this, though. If you're at UCLA and you can't recruit, there's something wrong with you. It's a program that recruits itself. I just think we had a good staff. I think we had a staff of guys that worked together. I think Coach Herrick was a great closer when it came to recruiting, and I think he could sell the vision, and kids embraced that, and I think it helped. I could have been in somewhere else when I first started and did everything the same way and not got any players. In fact, our first year got Mark Gottfried and Steve Lavin. We were together on the same staff, and we were all kind of starting together in terms of Mark and I were on the road recruiting, and Coach Herrick would always tease me in front of people, and they would say congratulations to me, because in the fall signing period, we didn't sign anybody, right? And there was some pressure. And Coach Herrick would say, how many guys he signed? 0. He hadn't signed anybody, and we would laugh about it. But eventually we were able to get a couple of players and continue to go from there. So it wasn't easy at all. But working at UCLA, it was just a program that pretty much sold itself.
You just described the head coach as the closer, which implies that there were several steps before the head coach got in the room and actually sealed the deal. Take us inside the war room without obviously divulging any of the trade secrets, but inside the war room, how do you go about identifying a prospect that you want to recruit, and then once you have that prospect identified, who's involved, what are you doing, where are you going to see them play, and what are those conversations like?
Every now and then you will find a diamond in the rough, someone that some people don't know about, which is hard to do, especially nowadays with social media and the likes, but you can find it. But for the most part, there are a lot of scouting services that are out there. There are a lot of coaches that and a lot of times it's references. Kids calling you about it, and you have to be able to weed out the coach or the parents that's saying my kid's the next LeBron James, and you'll see, and you got to be able to weed out what's real and what's not real. But the references help, the scouting services help. Identifying who's out there is not as difficult as getting them. That's the tough part. You can go watch a player play sometimes 5 minutes. Okay, that one's really good, but can you convince him to come to your school? So
yeah, presumably if you're there watching him, so are a bunch of other coaches as well.
There's no question about it. And there have been a couple of times I remember as an assistant going out to watch a kid play, and I had never heard of him, and someone referred us to him. And I went and watched him, and I watched him a little longer, and it was one of these, Phil, where after a while you start to look around and see if any other coaches are seeing what you're seeing out here, because this guy is terrific. His name was Jason Terry, and he eventually became,
of course,
a big-time NBA player, and he was a big-time player there. So every now and then you find one of those guys, but then you have to try to figure out, okay, how we convince them to come here. And, it depends on if you have a staff where they recruit regionally, certain parts of the country, or you do it by feel, or who you had a relationship with this coach already and you feel maybe a little closer to the kid. So you kind of distribute who's going to be the point person to help the head coach recruit the kid, and then you kind of go from there.
So once you have identified the prospect, once you've had a chance to actually see them play, once you've had a chance to look at the numbers on the stat page, and now you're in a room talking to them, what are some of the most common things that you want to know about them personally?
Personally, there you go. What is the character like? In fact, something more recently, I've been involved in this, the Division I level for 30 years and going on 26 years as a head coach. But here in the last couple of years, it's something I knew, but I kind of overlooked it a little bit. If kids don't love the game, we kind of it's a little more difficult to take them now. When you talk about development, right, the kids that develop are the ones that are obsessed with the process, the ones that have that passion to be the best. Those are the ones that develop. You can take a kid that so-called develops, a coach that so-called develops kids, and they take someone that doesn't have a passion for the game. That kid's not developing.
Now, when you say love the game, have a passion for the game, there's no metric for that. How is that something that you're able to tell?
How much time do they spend in the gym doing something that's applicable? Some guys go to the gym, they work out for 10 minutes, put it on social media, on their Instagram. I got my grind in this morning, but their shoes weren't even tied, and they're just doing it for show. But
you're looking that really closely at the Instagram post, huh?
Well, you see it. That's our game now. That's this day and age.
Right. I
remember coaching Nate Robinson and Isaiah Thomas at the University of Washington, and they were both done playing, and they came. I came to the office. It was like 6 in the morning, and I hear the ball bouncing. Those guys are in there, sweating, perspiring, and they had gotten after it. And they were leaving there to go to a boxing workout, and then they had a shooting workout later that day, and they were going to play that evening. That's what I'm talking about. Not I went in the gym and I had 300 makes, I had 500 makes. But what if you took 5,000 shots? You didn't make very many. I had 500 makes. Okay, the kids that are in the gym working on things that are going to apply to making them be the best with a team. How much basketball do they watch? Are they a student of the game? Those are the ones, when you find those guys, they're gems. So you try to find that out, what their work ethic is like, what their character is like, what are they like as a teammate. I've known and been around players that have all of those qualities, but they're a terrible teammate. Nobody wants to play with them. Here recently, again, as long as I've been doing this, we're really putting a premium on those that love the game and are obsessed with the process.
Now, of course, there's competition for these players as well. So when you're trying to sell this program and Pepperdine University, what's your pitch?
Well, if those are the type of kids that we're recruiting, I hope that they feel that with us too. And I hope that they feel that that's the kind of culture we have in our program. Or else, if a kid loves the game and is obsessed with all that, and you don't have that culture in place, they're not going to want to come play for you. So hopefully they can see that and experience that with our program.
How much of a benefit is, I'm looking outside, just out the window, I see the Pacific Ocean right there. How much of a benefit is it to bring somebody here, sit them down outside and just say, well, look at that?
We've never lost a recruit because of the scenery, all right? That's never been the case. It certainly helps, but it takes a little more to that to actually get a kid to come play basketball.
You talk about culture, And that's obviously something that is very much on you to build. So a few years ago, there was a Pac-12 player poll that came out that named you the opposing head coach that players most wanted to play for. Mm-hmm. Now, whether these are players who ultimately committed to play for you or not, clearly the word is out that Lorenzo Romar, not necessarily Pepperdine, not necessarily Washington, you are somebody who players want to play for. How much of a point of pride is that for you?
I don't know what their reasoning is for it. Maybe because our guys took bad shots and they didn't come out, something like that. They felt they could shoot whatever they wanted if they played. I don't know what it is, but you certainly probably rather hear that than the alternative. Nobody wants to play for you. So the reasoning behind that statement, I couldn't tell you.
I'd imagine that it has to do, you talked about how you want to recruit character, you want to recruit personality, and I'm sure on the other end, that's something that they're looking for. How much is your own personality a factor when you're in that room?
I don't know. I just know what we try to do two things, and it's not from a book. It's not something, 5 ways to recruit. And this is one of the reasons, to me, who's on my staff is very important. I think one is we want to be honest with kids. We're not going to try to talk down another program, negative recruit, and we're not going to lie to a kid to get them. Once you lie to get them, you got to keep lying to keep them, that whole thing. We try to be honest. And then we try to take an interest in their life, what's going on. And that's not something I think that you can fake. Jim Herrick, again, a quote he would always say, you can't con a con and you can't kid a kid. They see right through it. It has to be something that they feel is genuine. And to me, that's really important, that if someone's going to be with you for any amount of time during their collegiate career, it's a very pivotal time in their life. And it's unbelievable the gratification you get to be a part of that journey with them and go through everything that they're going through with them, and even be in a position to help mentor them to make the right decisions or to get through some things, some obstacles that they're going through, on top of playing basketball, to use basketball as a teaching tool with them as well, how it can carry over into life. I get great joy out of that, and that's and when I say that's what we try to do, it almost sounds like it's a strategy. It's not a strategy. I think that's who we are.
That's just being a good human being, it sounds like to me.
Exactly. I know there's sometimes kids will commit and go somewhere else, and then they may run into a coach somewhere and the coach doesn't want to speak to them, doesn't have anything to say to them. Well, then you didn't have a real relationship. If you develop a relationship with someone, it's a relationship. It's something that you probably don't forget about.
Do you have any examples that you could share about a time that you've maybe helped mentor a player, help them get through something that's off the basketball court? Because obviously being in college, I remember when I was in college, I wasn't an athlete, but it was a stressful time. You got grades to worry about, relationships. You're really just first growing up. Are there any of those stories that you have?
Really, Phil, over a 30-year period, you're with a kid a lot. You spend a lot of time with kids there. I haven't really documented them. I don't keep a journal with them. I can probably remember the ones that maybe we failed a kid because it didn't work out and they weren't successful, whether it be in life or not. I can probably remember those more than the other ones that we helped because, again, I'm not recording, okay, we helped this one, let's mark that one down. Hopefully it's just naturally what you do.
That's a great way to look at it. It's what you're supposed to do, essentially, is what you're saying.
Hopefully.
Right. Now, the landscape of recruiting has changed. We talked a little bit about the transfer portal. How active are you guys in the transfer portal on either end? I know you have one coming in, but what has your experience dealing with the advent of the transfer portal been?
We haven't been as successful with the transfer portal. We've been very fortunate, as I said, to start to recruit and develop our guys in-house so that by the time, if they don't leave, by the time they're upperclassmen, they're as good as anyone that's in the portal or better. And but we will go to the portal. Boubacar Coulibaly, he's he's someone that's a transfer out of the portal. So I would imagine that potential to go into the portal will be there every year, but I don't believe our philosophy is to build our program off of the transfer portal. You know, we would prefer to have those that we raised within our program, you know, but there are instances where we go outside of our program and there is a need that we can't fill. We need someone with experience where we will go to the portal.
Yeah, and you mentioned wanting to, you know, keep it in-house, have players come up through the system, be here for 4 years, and that really is one of the cons of one of the criticisms that critics of the transfer portal will make is it makes it difficult to keep a roster together for that amount of years. Now, on the other hand, like you said, if you do have an immediate need and you want somebody with a little bit more experience than an incoming freshman, it certainly makes that easier to do. So on the whole, would you say that the transfer portal has been a net positive or net negative?
I'd say it depends on who you are. It's for some it's a negative. I think for more it's been a positive in terms of securing talent. But Phil, now what you have on top of that is the NIL. So I know you're not supposed to, but kids are in programs now that are being promised that if you transfer, we can give you a pretty good NIL deal, you know, and so some of those situations are hard to turn down, so it's just a little more problematic to keep kids in your program, even though we're trying to do that.
Yeah, and NIL is obviously something that's very big, very new, and a pretty hot topic of debate. I think we just saw last night the NCAA released some new guidelines for what boosters are allowed to do around NIL. But before we get into that, just, you know, zoomed out 3,000-foot view or 30,000-foot view. When NIL was first implemented, that was the answer to the calls for athletes to finally be able to make some money off of their fame and notoriety. So when the NCAA instituted NIL, did they get that right?
My concern about the NIL was only one concern was how do you monitor it? I think the NIL is great for kids. It's the modern day situation of back in the day when kids you'd provide jobs for kids. You know, now with the cost of attendance and some other things, kids don't need them as much. But back, you know, you'd recruit a kid, well, is there potential for me to get a job? Can you guys get me a summer job so I can make money? Well, to me, the NIL is something like that, but it's just hard to monitor, as we've already seen. It's hard to keep track of what's going on with it, but I think it's great for the kids.
We saw the Pac-12 and SEC commissioners actually travel to Washington to meet on Capitol Hill with senators, and I don't know exactly what came out of that conversation. Maybe the time this podcast is published, we'll know. But as we sit here today, what do you suppose that conversation sounded like?
I wish I could tell you. I'm too confused with it to be able to intelligently give you an answer or even fake like I could give you an answer.
Do you think NIL is something that ultimately will require intervention at the federal level?
Possibly. You know, different states have different laws with it. And it's in some cases it is an uneven playing field. There's no doubt about it. Even if it's a high-profile program, it depends on what state you're in as to if there's restrictions or not as to what you can do in regards to NIL.
As far as your team goes, is that something that you encourage, discourage, or are you pretty hands-off and just do whatever you want as long as it's legal?
Well, according to the rules, the coaches are not supposed to be involved in the NIL, according to the rules. But it is something once your players get here, you know, they talk about it, and they do have the right to hire an agent to help them find that. We encourage it. If they can do it and it works, we encourage it. And we're still working with our administration to figure out how we can best navigate through the NIL so we can be a factor as well.
What are some of the situations that is presented for your program? What are some of the things that you're trying to navigate with regard to NIL?
Well, we're still it's in its infant stages with us. We're still trying to work through it.
Okay. And in your opinion, just speculating ahead to the future, obviously we don't know what came out of that meeting on Capitol Hill. We saw the booster guidelines last night. What do you think is next in terms of the future in NIL? And if you could wave a magic wand and have your way, what are some of the changes that you would make right now?
Well, again, I think it has to be monitored better. I just don't know how you monitor it better. If it's in place and there's money out there and you can hire an agent to go do it, I just don't know how you monitor it. And that was, again, like I said, my concern initially was how do you monitor it?
Well, that's certainly going to be a question that I think a lot of us are going to be excited to see what the ultimate answer is too. We're almost out of time for today's show. I want to go back and ask you one more question with regard to the recruiting process. In your opinion, what's the number one piece of advice that you would want to give to any player who's trying to get noticed and get an opportunity at the next level, whatever that next level is? It's
be the best version of yourself that you can be, and be an impactful player that helps your team be the best that it can be. You know, we go out and watch players and during the recruiting, the live periods, and we see a guy that just will not pass the ball. Or when he does pass it, you hear a parent or someone else saying, shoot the ball more, shoot the ball. That's all you're hearing. And a lot of kids don't understand, unless you're making most of those shots, it's a turnoff. And I've watched kids that will play selfishly, and, you know, they come out of the game and their body language isn't great. I will scratch them off a lot of times, and I know a lot of other coaches do that. Go out, play hard, play the game the right way. You want to catch a coach's eye? You go out and play that game the right way. You're going to catch a coach's eye, and he will take you quicker than some other guy that's just out there playing selfishly for himself. And that doesn't mean, you know, as the kids say, a player is a bucket, meaning that he can really score. But a player can really score, and you're going out there playing the right way and you're taking a lot of shots, that's fine. But when there's someone that's open, you need to throw him the basketball. You don't need to have your head down shooting the ball over three guys. And that is really, I think, a big deal with coaches. Be the best version of yourself where you impact the score the right way for your team and make other players better.
Well, that is solid advice from one of the best in the game to do it, head coach Lorenzo Romar. Thank you so much for joining the show.
Thank you so much, Phil.
Thank you guys for tuning in. We will see you next time on the Cannon Sports Podcast. Thanks for tuning in. Make sure to subscribe and follow on Instagram at Cannon Sports, TikTok at Cannon Sports Official, and of course, cannonsports.com for all your sporting goods needs.